I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. Pam, do you want to call a roll call?
Absolutely. Joan Corbin.
Yeah.
EJ Giovanetti. Barry Lindahl.
Here.
Joel McRae.
Here.
Monica McHugh.
Here.
Luke Martz. Jackie Schmillen.
Here.
We have 6, so we do have quorum.
So first thing, do I have a motion and a second for the approval of the agenda? I will move approval.
Second.
For EJ, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Approval of the July 18th minutes. Do I have a motion and a second, or are there any corrections or additions that need to be done?
Second.
Motion by Joel, second by EJ, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, public forum, if there's anybody from the public who would like to speak.
I believe I'm on the agenda.
Or you can wait until your case to speak.
I believe there's no public comment on this case.
Yes. Okay, you can have 5 minutes.
All right, thank you. This is regarding case 003 below.
Can we get your name for the record, please?
Sure, my name is Charles Nocera.
Okay, Charles. All right, you can go ahead.
So there is no opportunity for public comment on this case, so I'm doing it here. I've sent a brief, and I would like that brief and supporting documents recorded to this case. The case is about government databases, data points, and research across states. So that's case 0003. For some background, when I was young and just starting out, I programmed submit rectangles. They're everywhere, on websites and in apps. I was good to go with no resistance. When I got a little older, I started seeing patterns across the submit rectangles. And the first resistance, not allowed. Departmental policy, cannot see patterns. The older and older I got, the more and more I started seeing patterns across subdivides, organizations, cities, states, provinces. The resistance got louder. That is not allowed. Cite a citation number. So the submit rectangles are entrenched and unchanging, limit oneself and limit others. So the solution is the yellow triangle that says if state, national, and beyond, tap here, right next to the submit rectangles. There is nothing in any citation number with regard to yellow triangles using keyword data analytics. The yellow triangles are for the young, life yet lived, that want the life lived skills. The yellow triangles are for the 62 plus that want to work, have life lived skills, and will be hired by the yellow triangles. This will put less pressure on Social Security, Medicare, and senior poverty. The yellow triangles are also for all other ages in between that want to level the age discrimination at higher age graphs. This is creating technology that the submit rectangles will not touch, 2 completely different skill sets that should be 50-50. So I am volunteering as a free public service to create the very first yellow triangle in the Iowa state government. So back to case 0003 below. So far, the higher age data points of the government databases have now exceeded 2 million employees across cities, states, and provinces. I can recognize the higher age pattern and the free solution. Iowa state government is at 0 for all three. Let's split the difference, 50-50. I will unsee half the sliding scale higher age pattern and unsee half the free solution. In meeting halfway, Iowa will see the sliding scale higher age pattern and half the free solution. Iowa can decide the million that will be tossed. Iowa can decide on the mediator. I am all in on mediation of the median by a mediator, 50-50. I am requesting an intermediary review for 17A. That was a tongue twister. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Nasser. Do we have anybody else who would like to make any public comments?
I'm not seeing anyone else unmute themselves. I don't know if there's anyone here.
I'm asking the board chair. I don't really have anything to discuss, other than I will be gone next meeting. So hopefully, and then EJ may not be there, so if the rest of the board could make sure that they're there for quorum, that would be great. And with that, I think we can go on to the advisory committees.
I do have to say one thing. I did neglect to put the election on the agenda, so it will be on the agenda next time.
Yes. All right, I want to talk about the advisory committees that we have.
All right. So 24A00003. This is an advisory opinion. It's been on the agenda or on our waiting to come to the board for a couple months. This was a number of months ago, I believe, back in May. There was some review of a case involving whether or not there was a requirement for government entities to take data that's in their databases and do some computation regarding that. The board tabled or made a decision on that case administratively, but asked for further review of that. So this is the advisory opinion in regards to that. And so in looking at it, there's two questions to look at. The first is whether or not Iowa law requires that government bodies provide data pulled from their database in response to a records request. As you read through this, I think that is pretty clear that if there is existing data in their database, that would be a public record. It might be confidential, but it would be a public record. And if it wasn't confidential, would need to be provided. We have the Ripperger case where the court, found that the list in their property tax revenue system was generated from requests to not be included online. The court said that is a public record. Ultimately, it was confidential. Since the underlying data was confidential, it was not created, but it was clear that you did have to provide that information. The second question, though, is to what extent does Iowa law require that government entities do an actual search or manipulation? In the case that we reviewed, the issue was they wanted a data point, date of birth, I believe, which is a confidential data, so it couldn't be released. And so they were asking the government body to utilize the data they had and then do some calculations based on that data to give a separate data point unrelated to anything that was in their database. So they had, the question was whether or not the government body had a requirement to do that extra step of doing that manipulation because they had data that could do that manipulate or could ultimately come and answer that question. Are they required to? In looking at the definition of a public record, which requires that the record be stored or preserved of in any medium belonging to the government body, and also combined with our longstanding rule that you're not required to answer questions in regards to a public records request or to create a new record that doesn't exist. Requiring or mandating that government bodies utilize their data to then put in place calculations to create a new data set that is not currently existing in their database is not required under law. There's nothing that prevents them from doing that if they choose to do that and could charge for the cost of that programming, but there's nothing in the code that would mandate that they do that without their choice to do that. So that's the extent, that's the gist of this advisory opinion. I'm happy to answer questions regarding that if there are any.
Any board members have any questions or comments?
I don't have any questions, but this is kind of a complicated issue for me, and I think it's a very well written opinion.
I would agree.
Do I have a motion and a second to adopt the advisory opinion?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any other comments from the board? Now I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Advisory opinion adopted. Okay, second advisory opinion.
Yeah.
Kim Murphy is going to present this.
Yeah, so this is advisory opinion 24AO0008. And this request for an advisory opinion comes to us from a county attorney, and it involves a government employee's use of a personal cell phone to record government business, the development of a transcript from the recording, and the lawful custodian of the recording. So that's really what the request is for, an advisory opinion on that particular issue. The specific questions that came up were whether a recording of government activity made by a government employee on their personal device and the corresponding transcript of the recording constitute a public record, whether production of the transcript would be sufficient in lieu of the recording itself, and who is the lawful custodian of the recording, the underlying recording. So as we looked at this issue, it really led to three specific questions. So does the transcript of the recording satisfy the public records request, or must the actual recording be produced? Should an individual seeking the recording request it directly from the employee, or who truly is the lawful custodian of the recording? And what steps must the county attorney's office take to secure the recording if it is deemed a public record? So those are really the three specifics that we dove into once we got a closer look at the circumstances of the advisory opinion. So the first thing we looked at, and this is probably the most clear-cut part of the advisory opinion, is whether the recording is a public record that should be released. And so we looked at the basic definition of a public record, and we determined that the recording was made by an employee of the county auditor's office, and it was the recording of an interaction between and amongst government officials related to government business, and that clear precedent exists to establish that any medium, so even though it's a personal cell phone, can contain a public record, including a personal recording device. So we determined that this was a public record that belonged to the county based on that definition. So then the next issue that we looked at was whether a recording that's transcribed from the recording itself should also be a public record. And so we also noted that we previously determined underlying notes used to create minutes are an independent public record. And so this is very similar. These are almost like the underlying notes for the transcript. And so determined that that public recording, whether it's transcribed or not, is a public record independent of the transcription. So it should be a public record. There was also a reference to perhaps this was a confidential recording. And one of the things that we just want to make sure we point out in this advisory opinion is if that recording, even though it was transcribed, does contain some kind of confidential information that wasn't included in the transcription, it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be produced. It can be produced with redaction of any confidential portions. So that was a part of the advisory opinion we also thought was really important when talking about whether it was a public record that should be released. So then we moved on to the next question, which was, should anyone seeking this recording as a public record request it from the employee? And in this particular advisory opinion, we said that the lawful custodian of the public record should be the one who determines whether to release it, and that request should go to that lawful custodian, whoever that person is, and whoever meets that definition. So we know that a governmental body needs to designate the lawful custodian or the publicly designated responsible official to determine whether to release that. And so we pointed them back to that portion of the chapter. Finally, the last part of this advisory opinion was looking at, in this kind of a situation, who makes the ultimate decision, who as the county attorney, what steps do they have to take to make sure that they comply with Chapter 22 and make sure this is released appropriately. And so we pointed out a few things in this advisory opinion. It's ultimately the responsibility of the government body or lawful custodian to determine whether they should be released and whether there's a justification for denial. And then we pointed to a couple of best practices that the government body should have a policy that governs the use of private devices for government business, because this was a personal cell phone that was used for the recording, and that policy should discuss how the government body and lawful custodian have access to private devices that may contain public records and how they get that information when it's on the private device. And we also said that a best practice would be to make sure that they consult with their legal counsel and county attorney on any kind of public records requests that come through. So we want to make sure that in this case, that county attorney who's helping to figure out how best to move through this issue is consulted. So we said that was a good best practice. So that is the advisory opinion, the questions that we looked at in this advisory opinion, and the guidance that we provided.
Thanks, Kim. There was a lot of work put into this one too, and I know we've had problems in our county about the use of private cell phones within meetings and things like that, and I think this is really important. Does the board have any other comments or?
Just for the record, this was a request from the Benton County attorney, and my firm does some legal work for the county, so I'm going to abstain from any discussion.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave.
Really well done.
Very, very well. Any other comments? If not, I will call for a vote. All in favor of advisory opinion 24 AO? Didn't get a motion. Oh, we didn't. That's right. I'm sorry. Can I get a motion in a second?
So moved.
Moved by Barry. Do I have a second?
Wait, second.
Second by Joan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, last advisory opinion.
And Eric is going to present this for you guys.
All right. So this is advisory opinion 24AO0009. We got an anonymous request over what the definition of a government body is, whether a non-government body may serve as the lawful custodian of public records for purposes of open records requests. So there were 4 questions posed within this. First, is a charitable foundation that is associated with a public institution of higher education in Iowa, a government body, and subject to Iowa Code Chapter 22? Second, if the charitable foundation is deemed to be a government body, would the foundation or the university serve as the lawful custodian? Third, if the university is determined to be the lawful custodian, would the university then have to have physical possession of the public records? And what, if any, limitations exist on the foundation records outside of Iowa Code Chapter 22.7? So regarding the first question, Iowa Code Section 22.1, subsection 1, notes that unless its facilities or indebtedness are supported in whole or in part with property tax revenue and it is licensed to conduct pari-mutuel wagering pursuant to Chapter 99D, a charitable foundation is not a government body. So looking into Chapter 99D, I believe it had to do with the state fair. So not related to a charitable foundation related to an educational institute. Going on to the case of Gannon, the Board of Regents, where the Iowa Supreme Court didn't discuss, they didn't reach the issue of whether the Iowa State University Foundation, the foundation in the case, was a government body, but rather the question was, is the charitable foundation performing a government function? And it assumed for the case of that appeal that the ISU Foundation was not a government body. So just kind of going through here, Gannon was looking at a private entity that contracts with a government organization doesn't necessarily mean that the private entity is performing a government function. It has to be the product of a highly interwoven and symbiotic relationship. So in the ISU case, the foundation was created by ISU. It was staffed by ISU staff members. It was dealing with issues of scholarships and funding. So it had a symbiotic relationship with ISU. And so the records there were public records at the ISU Foundation, and you can't, a public government body can't try and shield public records from review by sending them off to a private foundation. That was the rationale in Gannon. So the initial holding that I would recommend for this one would be that a charitable foundation is generally not a government body, a private charitable foundation. Second, if the charitable foundation is determined to be a government body, would the foundation or the university serve as the lawful custodian? So just going through, looking at the purposes of Chapter 22, it's intended to apply to government entities, not to private entities. That's our jurisdiction. We're not looking into, like, you know, what's going on at X corporation down the road. That's a private entity. So regardless of whether that private entity generated public records, the lawful custodian of the public records ought to be the government body that the private entity is performing a government function on behalf of. So going to that, there's the the City of Dubuque v. Dubuque Racing Association Limited, the holding in that case indicated that a physical custodian and a lawful custodian would be separate entities if the physical custodian was a private entity and the records in question were generated on behalf of a public entity. So there is some case law we have behind that as well through the Iowa Supreme Court. So the holding for that would I would recommend would be that the university is the lawful custodian of the documents. Now, or the public entity that the private entity is serving on behalf of. Third, if the university is determined to be the lawful custodian, would the university then have to have physical possession of the public records? So the Gannon didn't seem to have an issue with the fact that the public records were physically possessed on site at the foundation. Rather, it was more making sure that, yes, those documents are still, if they're public records, they're still subject to Chapter 22. So the records, I would recommend, could be held at a private entity. However, the public institution ought to make sure that there are appropriate procedures in place to facilitate the timely retrieval and delivery of public records, should such records be requested under Chapter 22. And fourth, what, if any, limitations exist on foundation records outside of Iowa Code Chapter 22.7? So public records ought to be treated the same regardless of whether they're generated by a government entity or a private entity. So Iowa Code Chapter Section 22.7 lists the types of public records that may be withheld as confidential. It's the only confidentiality section within Chapter 22. Anything that's within the jurisdiction of Chapter 22 can only be shielded from review by 22.7 and not by statutes outside of that. So those were my recommendations for that advisory opinion. If you have any questions, or comments.
Eric? Does the board have any comments on this? If not, I'll ask for a motion in a second.
So moved.
Moved by EJ,
Second.
seconded by Barry. Any other discussion from the board?
Just thank you. Very
Thank
nicely
you very
done.
much. Very nice. All in favor?
Aye.
Say aye.
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 Any opposed? Sorry, Jackie. Any opposed? That was adopted as well. Good job. Very good job, Eric.
Thank you.
All right. Cases. Eric, I'll let you start.
All right, this is case, multiple cases starting with 23 FC 0114. Banster, Rimpey, McKee versus South Central Regional Airport Agency. This is a probable cause report. Essentially, the South Central Regional Airport Agency is governed by a 5-member board of directors. 3 members are appointed from one city, 2 are appointed from another. And they have a 28A agreement to creates the South Central Regional Airport Agency that created an executive committee for the purposes of oversight and administration of the airport facility. Ultimately, this board has found that the executive committee was a governmental body under chapters 21.2 And the executive committee would be subject to Chapter 21 requirements when a majority of its members met to deliberate or act on the scope of its duty. On February 15th, IPIB did accept the complaint regarding the executive committee's meetings on September 13 and November 21 that did not meet the requirements of Chapter 21. Following that acceptance, IPIB staff worked with the parties to try to put together an informal resolution. There was no agreement between the parties regarding that. However, the South Central Regional Airport Agency did accept the terms and did approve the informal resolution that was suggested by IPIB staff at its meeting on July 3rd. That informal resolution required that the airport agency acknowledge the executive committee as stated in 2080 agreement is a government body, that anytime their members meet for the executive committee, that they would be subject to Chapter 21. They acknowledge the meetings were subject to that, and that there was, they will ensure that any committees or governing bodies created within that 2080 agreement or any revised 2080 agreement will comply with Chapter 21 requirements. They did conduct a training session through the Iowa League of Cities. The airport agency board members, attorney, and others involved in compliance attended and completed the training session. They did provide the minutes from the training session, and they did approve this agreement at an open meeting. Based on the investigation of the complaints, I do make the recommendation that the board determine that there is probable cause to exist to believe that the executive committee of the airport agency did violate Iowa Code Chapter 21 when it held its meetings on September 13th and November 21, because they were not in compliance with Chapter 21. But the complaints be dismissed as a matter of administrative discretion. Since the acceptance of these complaints, the airport agency has acknowledged the error and worked to ensure no further violations will occur. The airport agency did adopt the terms of the informal resolution that was outlined by IPIB staff to resolve and remediate the complaints raised.
Do we have anybody from the SCRAA here?
I'm Amy Beatty on behalf of the South Central Regional Airport Agency. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. Erica has laid out the facts. We did adopt the informal resolution and proceeded through the training, and everyone party there was there. So, glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Is there any other complainants who would like to speak on behalf?
Yes.
I have 5 minutes.
My name is John Vanstra, and before I begin, I want to thank you for the signs how to get here. That was much easier than last time we were here and wandered around aimlessly. Having said that, I want to thank you for the opportunity to address this board. We, the complainants, do not disagree with the unanimous decision of the board in finding the SCRAA Executive Committee to be a government body. We also do not disagree that the SCRAA Executive Committee did not comply with open meetings requirement of Chapter 21. Our disagreement from the informal resolution is that it does not contain sufficient deterrent to follow the law. Yes, the SCRAA board was required to attend an hour-long training session presented by the Iowa League of Cities. Do you consider a training session to be a deterrent? Chapter 21.6.3a states, shall assess each member of a government body who participated in its violation damages in an amount of not more than $500 and not less than $100. Notice the word shall. The dictionary defines shall as an order, promise, requirement, or obligation, whereas the word may is defined as to be allowed or permitted to. The Iowa Supreme Court has noted similar difference between shall and may in its rulings. The Iowa House of Representatives also intended violation damages by passing House File 2539. This bill increases the violation damages to $2,500 and not less than $1,500. The Iowa Office of Ombudsman is following this case closely. They consider this a landmark case, as this case is setting precedents in subcommittees of a government body. This case will be used for future rulings, much like the Mason versus Vision Iowa Board referenced in this case. By not assessing violation damages, future cases will cite this case to also avoid violation damages. In this particular case, the meeting to be found in violation of Chapter 21 was attended by the attorney for the board. The chairman of the board and executive board member is an attorney. If attorneys cannot understand and follow the law, then we expect the average citizen to understand and follow the law. If the formal resolution included violation damages, being assessed as stated in Chapter 21(6)(3)(a), all complainants would agree to sign the informal resolution. Thank you for listening to my comments and considering them.
Madam Chair, just noting, I will be recusing myself from this.
Any comments from the board?
Do staff have any comments, responses to Mr. Banster's assertion?
So I would say that, the discussion of fees was brought up. It has not been the practice of this board during an informal resolution to assess fees to complainants. The code requires, consideration of those fees, by our board after a contested case and a finding, affirmative finding, through that contested case proceeding. So that is why, there were no fees included, as a requirement in the formal resolution. I would also say that when the board did review this case in finding a violation from the executive committee on a 28E agreement, there was quite a bit of deliberation and debate regarding that. This 28E agreement has been in place for, I believe, 10 years. There's been a number of changes in the participants to that 28E agreement, and the executive committee throughout that 10-year period has not operated under the Chapter 21, including when Mahaska County was a portion of that. That's my understanding from the investigation of this complaint. That doesn't change the fact that the executive committee was found to be be subject to 21, and they have taken steps at this point to ensure that they do comply with that. But I do not find that this is the type of case where there was an intentional decision to violate the code.
I guess I certainly appreciate Mr. Bannister's comments and obviously the work he went to put them together. I've been on the board for a while. I think I was 5 when I got here, but it's been a long time and the only time I think we've ever considered levying any fees, right or wrong. And I think I looked at precedent, as you point out, precedent is an issue. But we've never done it before, and I think the only time we've ever considered is where it appeared to be intentional. But we haven't gotten there. And it seems to me these folks have been cooperative and admitted that they made a mistake, and apparently are now willing to go on. So I think it's a matter of them not knowing what they should do rather than trying to poke the finger in somebody's eye. So I would have a hard time levying any kind of fine because it'd be punitive in nature, and I don't know that it'd do any good for anybody, but it's just one board member's opinion. But I appreciate your approach. I really do. You've obviously come a ways to speak to us, and I appreciate that. But that's just my position on it.
I agree with EJ's comments.
Any other comments from the board? If not, I'll ask for a motion in a second.
I move. Sorry.
EJ moves. Do I have a second?
EJ, just to be clear, that is your move to, find that probable cause exists, but dismiss as a matter of administrative?
Yeah, and the one thing, and I appreciate you mentioning that, I think the one thing, and I understand it appears, and rightly so, it appears there's some conflict. Mr. Masters pointed out that the shall, and we all understand what that means. On the other hand, what I look to as well is the fact that we, but in our statute, we have the discretion to carry out the dismissal as the director suggested. So I guess that's, I wanted to explain that. Thank you. I think we have the discretion to do this, even in light of.
I have a move. Do I have a second?
Second.
EJ, second by Barry. All in favor of accepting the probable cause report and dismissing with
Aye.
Aye.
aye. Any opposed?
And Joan abstains.
Yes, Joe abstains from this. Thank you much. Official. Thank you, Mr. Belster, for including this too.
Thank you for listening to.
Next case.
This is case number 23FC0130. This is Keegan Jarvis versus Swan City Council. This is a final report. In this case, Mr. Jarvis had filed a formal complaint in November 2023 alleging the Swan City Council violated Iowa Code Chapter 21 in regards to a closed session that was held on November 14th. A vote was taken during that closed session that resulted in a final decision. The formal complaint was accepted by Iowa Public Information Board on January 18, 2024. The parties did approve an informal resolution, and IPIB approved that informal resolution report on May 16, 2024. The parties, IPIB staff provided training on May 16, 2024, and proof of compliance with the terms of the informal resolution were provided on August 8, 2024. There was a little time in there just because they needed to ensure the terms were included in their minutes, and due to the timing of their meetings, it took a little while to get that done. But based on this, all terms of the informal resolution have been completed, and the IPIB should dismiss this complaint as successfully resolved. So I would request that you accept the final report and dismiss this complaint as resolved.
All right, do we have Mr. Jarvis available who would like to speak? Do we have anybody from the Swan City Council who would like to respond?
I do not see their counsel.
Any comments from the board on this? If not, can I get a motion
So moved.
to,
Accept the informal resolution and dismiss the complaint as successful.
I would second.
motion by Joel, second by Joan? Any other comments from the board? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Next case.
All right, this is Brett Christensen concerning the city of Silver City, case number 24FC0009. This also is a final report. Mr. Christensen had filed his formal complaint in January 2024, alleging the city of Silver City violated Iowa Code Chapter 21, when at the beginning of a meeting, the agenda was amended by the mayor to include additional items that were not included on the agenda originally, as noticed. IPIB accepted this complaint on March 21, 2024. The parties worked toward an informal resolution agreement. Mr. Christensen approved that informal resolution on April 15th. The city council approved the informal resolution on May 14th. IPIB provided training to the council on July 9th and confirmed that all terms of the informal resolution have been met, so the complaint should be dismissed as resolved. So I would make a recommendation to approve the final report and dismiss the complaint as resolved.
We have Mr. Christensen. Who would like to speak on the
I don't see him.
board Anyone from the city of Silver City?
Anybody's stepping forward.
Any comments from the board? If not, do I have a motion and a second?
I move to approve the final report and dismiss the complaint.
Motion from Barry, seconded by EJ. Any other comments from the board? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carried. Next case, Zach Village.
Zach Village, City of Leland, case number 24FC0018. This also is a final report. On February 13th, 2024, Mr. Village filed a formal complaint alleging the City of Leland violated Iowa Code Chapter 22. He alleged the city was charging an unreasonable fee for the production of documents he requested. The IPIB accepted the complaint on April 18th, 2024. Staff worked with the parties for an informal resolution. The city did approve the informal resolution on June 26, 2024, provided documentation of that on June 27th. Mr. Village signed it on July 10th. Mr. Village did provide prepayment of the cost of the records as agreed in the informal resolution, a USB drive to the city. The city retrieved the documents and provided those that they had in existence to Mr. Village and refunded any the overpayment he made. He did receive all requested documents and recordings except for the meeting that was not recorded. Because there was no recording, nothing could be right there. Based on this, all terms of this informal resolution have been completed, and IPIB should dismiss this complaint as successfully resolved. So I would ask for a motion to accept the final report and dismiss the complaint as resolved.
Do we have Mr. Village?
Not seeing anyone.
Anybody from the city of Leland? Okay.
Not seeing anyone.
Any comments from the board?
Can I ask what the total expense was?
I believe I believe according to the informal resolution, it was 4 hours at $20 an hour. He paid the $80. They did refund him the additional overpayment, but I don't recall the amount of that refund.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? If not, I'll call for a motion in a second.
I move to accept the informal resolution as completed and dismiss the complaint as resolved.
Second.
Motion by Jones, second by Joel. Any other comments from the board? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, next case.
All right, this is Shayla Karras and Shelby City Council, case number 24FC0035. This is a revised dismissal order. This case came before the board last month. On March 23rd, Ms. Karras filed a formal complaint alleging the Shelby City Council violated Iowa Code Chapter 21 when they held a closed session that failed to comply with legal requirements. Her allegations were that they held a vote after the public portion of the meeting was adjourned and the public departed. And they only found out about the vote after the council released their minutes, showing that after the closed session, the council held a vote. The IPIB board, this originally was heard in June of 27. At that time, Ms. Karras indicated that her complaint was broader and asked for additional review conducted by IPIB staff, which the board did table for that additional review. Essentially what occurred is that the government body rearranged their agenda to allow for the closed session to be the last thing of the meeting in order to make it easy on the public and not having to wait through the closed session. Upon the conclusion of the closed session, they did come back into open session and make a motion to approve their attorney to review, to draft a document, a memorandum of understanding with an investor. In essence, basically, Ms. Karras alleges that the city led the public to believe that the open session portion of the meeting had ended. But then the city reconvened that open session after the public had departed. IFIB staff did review the full meeting, both the open and closed session, to determine whether or not they complied with Iowa Code Chapter 21. In reviewing the closed session portion, the city did not violate, IFIB staff found that the city did not violate Iowa Code 21.51. The minutes show that they did have it on the agenda. Roll call vote was held, and there was the applicable amount of votes to go into closed session. The agenda also indicated that other business was possible. Other business included a possible closed session regarding sale of real estate. IFIB staff does make a recommendation that future agendas include the specific code provision for the closed session, and including being very specific about that in the agenda. However, finding no violation, it was clear what the closed session was regarding. The IFIB staff did review the recording of the closed session and found the government body stayed strictly within the reason for the closed session and justification for the closed session, so found no violation there. In regards to the argument that the final action did not take place in an open session because the public believed the open session portion of the meeting was adjourned and was not present for the vote, IFIB staff reviewed various things. The agenda for the meeting did include an agenda item for department reports that were heard by the council following closed session. The videos show that the city council did rearrange the agenda to move the reports before the closed session. This change is discussed by the council and on the open session recording. They did indicate this was to make it easier for the public, so they wouldn't have to wait to the end of the closed session for those agenda items. Once the city council held a vote for the closed session and concluded their closed session, they did vote. Once they voted to go into closed session, they did adjourn the open session, and the recording shows members of city council thanked attendees for coming to the meeting, and the public can be seen leaving the venue. It's basically in reviewing this, there appears to be good intentions by the government body that resulted in some public misunderstanding. In attempting to move the agenda items to be respectful of people's times, they created the appearance that the open meeting of the portion was adjourned. But they did reconvene into open session to hold that vote, release minutes that correctly reflected the meeting. The city council did also vote on and discuss the item that was included in that portion in their next meeting in an open session. And in looking at the totality of it, while the city did inadvertently create a perception, the open session had ended. The city council took steps to rectify this perception by ensuring minutes were appropriately documented and by raising and voting on the issue at the next meeting of the city council. The staff wants to commend the city and Ms. Karras for their efforts to ensure public transparency. This is a concerning issue, even if it did not result in finding a violation by staff. And staff also dictates some best practices that the government body should consider. After reviewing in totality the facts and circumstances, the city appropriately used a closed session pursuant to Iowa Code 21.5. They did take actions to remediate any public misunderstanding of actions taken by the city when they did vote to ask their attorney to draft a memorandum of understanding following the closed session. So there is a recommendation of dismissal.
Is Ms. Karras on the line and would like to speak?
Yes, hi.
Right.
Thank you.
You can have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Just a brief response to the revised dismissal. When I presented my complaint about the 5th of March, the open session that occurred after the closed session. I just want to reiterate that, as I did in my previous brief, that it's not about the closed session, which was mainly the essence of this whole draft dismissal order. And that is not the essence of my complaint. The essence of my complaint was what conduct occurred after the closed session. The draft dismissal order states the evidence represents good intentions by the government body that resulted in public misunderstanding, but there's no misunderstanding. The open meeting was held without the public knowing, and it was announced. It was not announced. The public was adjourned. It was clear on the video that we were adjourned. We left. So I don't think that's a misunderstanding. So it's hard to convince the public of good intentions when that occurs. The draft dismissal order has 3 mitigating factors to the law. The first one is that the public appears not to be in attendance of the open meeting, and that they held a vote in open session and released minutes that correctly reflected the remainder of the meeting. The dismissal order improperly states the open session was properly convened. According to Chapter 21.4, Paragraph 1A, the government body shall give notice of the time, date, place of the meeting, and even a reconvened meeting, which this was not. Shelby City Council violated that requirement. They adjourned the public, and it was very clear in the video. The order states that the public appears not to be in attendance. They were not in attendance. It was very clear on the video that the public left. And we knew that it was adjourned, and that we knew that the only thing on the agenda was the closed session. Again, this is not about the closed session. I never disputed that they were proper in going into the closed session. The statement that regarding the minutes being released correctly reflected it after the fact is irrelevant because the violation already occurred. And then factor 2, it states that the recording did not reconvene after the closed session. Again, the complainant deals with the city holding a public meeting without meeting the requirements of Chapter 21. So the recording to me is irrelevant or not. I'm not complaining that they didn't record that. And then finally, factor 3, that they posted it in the minutes, and then they also discussed it on March 19th. Again, the public had no access to this meeting. The essence of my complaint is that they failed to notify us in advance that there was going to be a public portion after the closed meeting. So they held it without us knowing, without us having any conceivable idea that it was occurring. We all left, we went to our homes. We thought our city was doing what was in the public trust of holding a closed meeting and then adjourning, but they went into a public meeting afterwards without us knowing that and having no access. I think that this dismissal order would be very concerning for the future if cities can hold public meetings without giving the public notice. And by putting it in the minutes, that mitigates it so that meets their compliance. That creates somewhat of a shadow that occurs without the public knowing it, and just thinking that they can just throw it in the minutes after the fact is suffice to meet the law. Thank you.
Thanks, Karis. Is there anybody from the city who would like to respond?
Not seeing anyone.
More discussion?
Erica, I have this question. In reviewing, I'm understanding that you reviewed both the closed session recording and the meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm relating this to a recent meeting that we had that included a closed session at the end. So did they formally close the open session with a vote? Like after they voted to go into closed session, or somewhere in there before it, or?
Do you mean an adjournment?
Adjournment, yeah, voting to adjourn and then voted to go into closed session?
They did not take a vote to adjourn. They just took a vote to go into closed session. Because it was the appearance that adjournment was
Gotcha.
occurring.
Yeah, I was thinking about that because I mean, I don't know. I guess in our closed session, it was for purposes of student records. So we left that and just went to do the closed session. There wasn't anyone in attendance anyway, so it was, but what could have happened, I guess, that would have been clear to the public?
Yeah, I think in reviewing this, I think a good best practice would be not to change the order of the agenda. Now, they did that from the discussion that you can see in the video as a courtesy to the public. So they didn't have to break it up with a closed session, stick around while closed session's occurring, and then reconvene. But I think if they would have stuck with that original agenda, that would have helped. I think also not giving the appearance that it was adjourned. You know, I mean, I think that was what was confusing for people, is they were like, okay, bye, everybody. And then people left. They went into closed session and then came back out of closed session and took a vote. So I think that also was confusing for the public.
What was the original order supposed to be?
The closed session was somewhere in the middle of the agenda and it was before board reports, and they took board reports and moved them up ahead of the closed session.
So they did that for efficiency so that people didn't have to wait, I guess, or could see the entire.
That's right. Interesting. And so then they took the vote, directing the attorney to draft the motion. Then in the next board meeting, they brought it up again and voted on it at the next board meeting as well.
Oh, to try to mitigate what it
Correct.
Did they have a motion to move the closed session up on the agenda?
No, there was not a motion.
So how did they end up doing that?
It was just a discussion and then they moved it. I'm going to look through my notes and make sure that's correct, but that's my recollection, is there was not a motion to move it. They just discussed it and decided to take up the board reports prior to the closed session.
So there was some discussion about doing that, right?
Very brief, yes.
Okay.
I mean, I think a key factor in it is the mitigation. Another thing that I'm not, I don't believe it's in there, but the other thing is, the action to direct their attorney to draft something. I'm not sure if they needed to take action on that. I don't know if that was reviewed or not, but that's, I mean, they don't know if you need to take action to tell somebody to draft something to bring back to you to review. But
yeah, I didn't look at that specific issue, Erica, but that was my sense too, is that probably was not necessary. But that's what they did, and then they brought it up at the next meeting as well.
Well, I'm just trying to understand, if they discussed moving the closed session up on the agenda, why is there a complaint that they led the public to believe the open session of the meeting was ended? I don't understand that.
so the closed session got moved to the end of it. They moved reports up. And so they did that so that the board didn't have to wait, or the public didn't have to wait for the closed session. At the end of the closed session, they came back into open session to make a motion or to act on instructing their attorney to draft a document based on the conversation in the closed session. So the fact that the public didn't know that they would come back into open session and make that motion is the complaint about the closed session.
So they put the agenda out, and normally the board reports are at the very end of their agenda. And because they knew they needed to go into a closed session, they have that documented on the agenda. And in order to, because I think did they assume that everybody wanted to see the board or the reports?
No, I think that there's just a really brief comment from one of the council members, and I don't recall specifically, how she phrased it, but it was basically, we don't want to have everybody wait around for closed session to finish this meeting. So why not finish the meeting and have closed session at the end?
Okay, and so therefore it kind of led the public, because, I mean, let's face it, most members of the public don't understand that once you have a closed session, you need to, you open it up and there's typically a result of what happens in that closed session following that.
There could be, or
There could be, or there could not be, and most members of the public do not know that. And so I think that, and so I understand that the next meeting, they discussed and then voted again on their actions in the closed meeting.
That's correct. So was there a violation I mean, I think that's the question. And I mean, technically it was confusing for the public. There was a vote in open session where the public was not there, but they took that same vote again at the next meeting.
I don't think there was it does not appear to me that there was a violation. It was just kind of a very bungled.
Yes.
Because I don't think they quite, I think my assumption is that this board typically doesn't do closed sessions, which we hope most boards don't. And so I think they were kind of fumbling through it and following what they really should have done and should have been open to the public with. And so I understand that.
I think the intent, or I mean, I know it was intentional, but the appearance is that, you know, the public is there because they want to be at that meeting, and unless told otherwise, there was, I mean, they moved it to the end, and I guess by appearances, it looks like that's the end of the meeting for them because they didn't formally close it.
They didn't formally close it, but you can see them on video saying goodbye to the participants, and the participants leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just trying to think what best, I mean, I think best practice would be if you know that you intend to come back into open session, and if there's a chance that you're going to vote on that or whatever, you make it super clear.
Right.
To say, and I hope that was counsel that.
Because what you have to come out of the closed session into an open session. So, well, and either regardless of whether you have anything to vote on, because I know we've gone into closed session before and come out and not done anything on that closed session, but you still have to close the open portion of the meeting. And so I think there was some confusion on both parts, and it does not occur to me that it was really intentional that it happened that way.
There's also, is this accurate? There's a comment in the report that says that there's no page number on it. I can't tell you where it is, but the city council voted to adjourn the open session and moved into closed session. The recording shows that the members of the city council thanked attendees for coming to the meeting, and the public can be seen leaving the venue. So there was a motion to adjourn?
So was it to leave open session?
To go into closed session. There was a motion to go into closed session.
So they didn't close the open session.
Let me look back at the minutes.
And they thanked attendees for coming? I mean, it
They
sounds
did
like.
yes, they did do that. They thanked attendees. You can see them waving, saying thanks for coming. That was definitely clear on the video. I think where I need to double check is the exact order of the motion. So let me just look really quick here.
Sounds like the end of the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, the appearance was that it was the end of the appearance was that they were going into closed session, and once closed session would end, the meeting would be over. That was definitely the appearance. I just need to make sure I have the way the motions were laid out clear. So let me just look really quick. Okay, 1 second. Okay, I've got the minutes. Okay. On a motion, and then it says who made the motion, the council moved to go into closed session to discuss the sale of real estate according to Code of Iowa Section 21.5. There's a roll call. It does say council closed regular session at 8:45 p.m. and entered into closed session. Closed session ended at 9:32 p.m. Mayor reconvened the council meeting at 9:35 p.m. and then they do the motion and roll call on the memorandum of understanding. So it's the exact order in the minutes.
The drafting of the memorandum or approving?
To draft a memorandum on motion by, and then it says who motioned and seconded. The council directed Attorney Fisher to draft a memorandum of understanding to Damian Scholl for sale of real estate. And they did a roll call vote. And then on the 19th, which is the next meeting, they did the same thing again. So the
And
19th,
they didn't start the recording again either after that,
they did not start the recording.
which they should have.
The open session
Yeah,
recording,
the open session recording, they did not start recording it again.
which
After
the
the
law
closed session.
doesn't address,
You
right?
don't have to
You
record
don't
a
have
session.
to.
No,
And yeah, and I see where Barry is referencing that they closed. Where did that go? Voted to adjourn the open session and moved into closed session. So,
adjourn
I didn't-
isn't the correct phrase.
Those weren't correct?
They moved to, what time did they adjourn the meeting, at 9 or 9:40?
Sure.
Well, this is what's confusing. It says that they have a motion to go into closed session and they approve it. And it says council closed regular session at 8:45 PM. Had a short recess and entered into closed session. Then closed session begins. And then they reconvene the council meeting. And do the motion.
If they reconvene the open session, that says to me that they didn't close it.
Right.
So I guess if they adjourned the closed meeting, that would be different. But what was I guess my question, if I can, but what was the motion made in the first meeting? Was it instructing the city attorney to draft the document? Was that it?
Yes. On a motion, the council directed Attorney Fisher to draft a memorandum of understanding to Damian Scholl for sale of real estate, and then a roll call vote.
I guess my question to staff is, do you have to have a motion to ask your attorney to do something?
I mean, it's not in there, but I'm not sure that it was something
I
that
did
they
20
needed to
years
take
break
action
law.
on. So, but they did take action on it the next meeting. Did they take action on the memorandum itself or the drafting of the
Nope,
memorandum?
the next meeting, so March 19th, so March 5th was when they had the closed session. March 19th, on motion, they direct memorandum of standing for Damian Scholl in the industrial site. Wait.
Yeah, it's not really final action, I don't think.
Barry,
I'll just tell you what my experience has been. In the closed session, they would give the attorney direction to draft it. And when they come out, the mayor would say, we've given direction to our attorney, period. So I don't think that what they did after the meeting is a violation at all.
Yeah. Would you read that, the second agenda?
The second, so these are the minutes from March 19th.
Yeah.
The next,
The
so
second meeting. I want to know how that was addressed at the second.
That's the March 19th meeting.
Yep. So on the agenda, it says on March 19th, discussion, possible action, memo of understanding, Damian Scholl industrial site. Then in the minutes themselves, it says on motion, memo of understanding for Damian Scholl and the industrial site approved. And there's a roll call vote. So they do that vote on the memo a second time.
So here's what I think we need to look at. I would like to table this because I think we need to look at the page that starts, this is the cornerstone of the complaint. And if you go to the paragraph underneath the bullet and you go up to the fourth sentence, it says council was, let's see, following the agenda change last night of addressed by the city council was closed session. That next sentence is the city council voted to adjourn the open session and moved into closed session. So did they actually vote to adjourn the open session? That's what I would like to know on the tape. Because if they did, they essentially did close the public meeting. Then they went into closed session, then they reopened it. So it is very confusing to the public because if they said they've adjourned it, that is like, all right, tell the public, see you later, we're done. And that, so.
It gives the appearance of it not being transparent about
Right.
what's going to happen.
Exactly.
Later, or what did
So
happen.
your issue is the word adjourned.
The word adjourn. The city council voted to adjourn the open session.
Okay, so the minutes say closed regular session, but the question is whether on the video itself, do they say we are adjourning?
Right, because that's in our order here. It does say the city council voted to adjourn. So if they voted to adjourn,
The public couldn't reasonably know they were going to reconvene.
exactly.
Well, I don't know. It doesn't say adjourn the meeting. It just says adjourn the open session.
Yeah.
That's the issue.
That's the issue. I mean, to me, if they voted to adjourn, and I get it, adjourn the open session, but I'm not an attorney, remember that, Barry.
No, I mean,
So-
we would, in Dubuque, we would say, you know, there would just be a motion to move into closed session. We don't.
Right, there, you wouldn't close the open session. You would say we're voting to move into
Yeah.
closed session.
Yeah, but I don't get hung up on that as much as I do with city council thanking attendees for coming to the meeting. I mean,
Well, and that's part
To
of
me,
it, Barry. I mean, if you think of that's like, okay, it's done, it's over with, and that's what I'm getting at with this adjournment. So I think maybe we need to go back and look at the tape again. So, I don't know, I'd kind of like to table to get a better understanding on what they're actually trying to say.
I guess where I come on this is, they fumbled it, and it was not good. They don't need a motion to ask the attorney to draft, so they really didn't even need to take a vote.
Right.
right.
They did correct their error on the very next meeting and did it properly. So to me, it's really harmless error. And I guess I would call it harmless error, and then I would be in favor of dismissal.
I agree with that if you're strictly looking at what they did after the closed session. You know, I'm just a little concerned that when they thanked everybody and people left, but again, there's no, no damage that occurred as a result of that, so.
Right, and it was properly sourced for the next meeting, and the public had an opportunity to address that, and then the council took the vote, so.
Right.
That's why I think it's harmless error, and I don't think there was an intent there to deceive the public by any means. They just kind of fumbled through it.
Certainly shouldn't do
They
it.
shouldn't have done it that way. There's a better way to do it.
Has the city agreed to any training about how to handle this?
You know, and maybe that's what we would do, is that we would recommend, hey, just we would offer you training, not require it, but we would offer that to you as to help you through it.
We're more than happy to go and provide training. We've done that for places. So the question is, Joel, do you want a redraft? Would you want a redraft of this, or table for next month, with a redraft of that, or the motion?
Yeah, actually, the chair brought up the first motion, so I need to defer.
Well, I was asking.
Well,
So-
you were asking, and I wasn't. I just wanted to make sure I'm proper.
Yeah, I mean, they fumbled it. We all agree with that. I struggle with saying, let's go ahead and dismiss this. Because I don't think this was a small fumble. I think it was kind of a colossal fumble, and it concerns me that did their attorney advise them how to handle the closed session?
Erica,
Was he in the closed session?
he was in the closed session.
I mean, there were errors along the process here
Yeah.
and how they did that. However, they didn't even need a motion coming out. I assume that they properly adjourned the meeting, the first meeting, properly.
Well, I'm not sure they did.
Did they take a
because
vote on adjournment after the closed session from the first meeting?
Yeah, was there a motion taken at all on that issue?
So,
We can only go with what the minutes said because there was no video of it.
yeah, there was not, it does say council meeting adjourned, but
So prior to the closed session, did they file, or did they have a motion to adjourn with everyone voting and then have another motion to go into closed session? That's my question.
so my recollection is,
What do the minutes say?
the minutes say there's only a motion to go into closed session. That's it. That's the only motion. And then it says council closed regular session, had a short recess and entered in closed session. The only motion is going into closed session.
So where did that language come from that they voted to adjourn?
I voted to adjourn open session.
So that would have been probably the wrong
Yeah,
choice.
Yeah.
In drafting.
So we need to correct that at a minimum. Right?
Yes.
It should just be that they voted to go into closed session.
and closed regular session. Would that be?
No, you don't close the regular session. If you go directly into a closed session, the meeting technically stays open, but the board goes into a closed session.
That's,
Vote to come out of a closed session, and then they close the public meeting when everything is done.
that's what's confusing though, is the minutes specifically say council closed regular session at 8:45 PM.
That's the problem. So I'm not sure this should be a dismissal if that's what they did, because they did violate chapter 21 because they closed the open session. And that's not what they should have done. They should have voted to go into closed session.
That's the point.
And that's the point that the complaint makes. And so
Because she couldn't reasonably see
Right.
that there might be another vote
Exactly.
taken. And that is not airing of transparency.
It seems to me that in the absence of either a motion to close or the chair declaring closure, you are not closed. But I think this is foggy enough. I'm with Joel. Well, I'm actually,
You got in between both places.
I'd be inclined to table it and get to where Joel was talking about. But I'm trying to, we can't compel, as I understand it, we can't compel training unless we find that there's been a violation. But if there's some way you could get training, without, then I think it's sloppy and this was poorly handled, et cetera, best practices and everything else. But I just don't think this doesn't reach the, in my opinion, problem. That's just what I'm saying.
I don't know, that's my concern, is that they voted to adjourn the open session.
I think the adjourn word came from our drafting.
Okay. So that's,
My question is, what wouldn't it be if adjourn was not there? It's it would close.
Sort of using it,
So, I
not
mean,
in a technical sense.
So, I mean, the thing is, if they hadn't come back and taken a vote to direct their attorney to draft something, this wouldn't be an issue at all. right? It was that action that occurred after the closed session.
No,
That doesn't
no,
make any
no,
sense.
no.
You didn't have to make that motion to get them to direct.
Right, but what I'm saying is the reason there's a complaint is because that action was taken.
Well, not necessarily, because if they voted to close, or if they voted to adjourn the open session, so this is what we need to determine, but if they were telling everybody, thanks for coming, it almost appears like they did, and then they would have been closed session. And so they still had not officially closed the public meeting.
Right, but yeah, I mean, the thing is, they should. They didn't follow, well, you can all agree they didn't follow process, but the fact is that they were trying to be cognizant of the people's
Right.
time. Nobody wants to stick around for 45 minutes to an hour to find out what if people stuck around for 45 minutes to an hour and then there's no action taken. Yeah,
But the point is, the public needs to know that. Did they or did they not take action? And if they voted to close the open session, the meeting should have been done and there shouldn't have been a closed session. They should not have even got into a closed session because the meeting was quote officially closed. So they should have voted to go to closed session. They shouldn't have told everybody, see you later. Glad you made it. Because they didn't, the meeting should not have been closed, but that they give the appearance that the meeting was done, regardless of whether they took a vote after the closed session. I think we need to look back and so regardless of whether they made a vote at the end, they rectified that at the next meeting. I agree with that. The point is, did they close the meeting and then vote to go into closed session, or did they vote to go into closed session? That's what we don't know. And there is a recording of the meeting, correct?
Yes, but they did both. I mean, we know they did both
So
from
they
the
did
minutes.
both. So they did make a violation because they closed the meeting and then voted to go into open session. Well, you can't do that if you've already closed your meeting.
But do you consider closed, see, I go back to what I said earlier. I think in the absence of a motion to close or motion to adjourn, I guess, or the chair declaring it closed, I don't think you close it. I mean, I don't think that's legally, that's just what I understand it to be.
You mean you're talking about the open session?
Yeah,
So they
I don't-
motioned to go.
I don't think you have to close the open session. You're in a meeting, you're in an open
Right.
session of a meeting. You move to go into closed session, the meeting is still open. I mean, the meeting is still there.
and that's what I think, I agree with you, Barry, and I think that's what happened. And because what I'm saying, it was neither, the real issue is whether or not the meeting was ended, whether you call it closed or adjourned. And I don't think they did that in the absence of somebody's, like say the chair declaring it closed or a motion. So I think it was still an open meeting.
I don't know, just because of the wording, I think we need to go back and review the tape or the video of what happened before they went into a closed session.
I know from watching the video that they did not vote on closing regular session. They only did the vote, which is like, the minutes are accurate in that way, that they did the vote on closed session. They did not do a vote on closing regular session.
And I think that's all you have to do.
I agree.
I would agree with that, but I think we need to have this reworded. Instead, the city council voted to adjourn the open session and moved into closed session. So we need to review that to make sure that they didn't vote, that they didn't say, we're gonna vote to close the session and then go in, or vote to close the meeting, adjourn the meeting, and then go into closed session.
Yeah.
Because those should be two separate votes, but if they did that together, I mean, that's not,
Sounds like they just voted to go into closed session.
That's the
word
only vote.
adjourned got
okay.
put in as a
So we should,
inappropriate
so
word
we need
in the
to,
draft.
we need to correct that, but
I think that's
let's
fine.
verify that.
Yeah, I don't see a violation.
No, I don't either.
That's,
It's unfortunate that they thanked people. I still don't understand that, but
Well, I think that goes to intent, and their intention was that they were trying to be respectful of the community. And they were trying to do the right thing, realized they didn't do the right thing. That's why they brought it up again
right.
on the second meeting.
No,
So there is no intent here. So that's why I still think it's harmless error, with an offer of training. But we do have a manner of correcting the verbiage in our order.
So correcting the verbiage in the order is pretty easy. You can make that as part of your motion. The question is, do you want to table it and have us redraft it, or
I would
do you
like,
want to?
I guess I would like it verified. Like, between the minutes and the looking at the videotape or recording. I don't know, but that's,
motion to table it for that purpose.
Barry has a motion, do I have a second? Yeah, no, okay, yeah, exactly, Barry, that's.
So I don't think there's a motion on the floor.
Yeah, there isn't a motion on the floor then.
Oh, I'd move to table it for the purpose of determining, correcting the report if it needs to be corrected to show what action was taken when they went into closed session.
All right, so now we do have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, motion by Barry, second by Joan to go ahead and table. Any other board discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Right.
Two opposed?
4-2.
4-2.
Can't agree on everything.
No,
I respect the decision, so.
I mean, this is definitely a squirrely case.
It is.
Yeah,
It is.
it
And
is.
I very much respect the decision you take.
I think, pathetically, I think this is kind of everything up in the rules.
We can work on that.
Give it to legislative.
Madam Chair, if I step out, point of privilege, if I step out to use the restroom, do we have a quorum or not?
We have 6 people here.
So we're good. Go ahead. Go.
Dismiss me.
We promise not to talk about it.
Too much.
All right, next case.
All right.
Blake Jones and City of Aurora.
Blake Jones and City of Eldora, case number 24FC0043. In this case, Mr. Jones filed a formal complaint against the city alleging a violation of chapters 21 and 22. He claims he requested information regarding a potential contract agreement with the city and Blue Line Solutions that was listed on the agenda for May 14, 2024. He attempted to contact 3 council members to clarify the contents of the contract. The contract was listed on the consent agenda portion of the meeting, and he alleges this was done to keep the public from commenting or asking questions. He stated he made a records request for the contract via text message to 3 council members to inquire about it. He felt he did not have time to make a written records request for a copy of the contract. Brent Hinders, attorney for the city, provided a response. He stated that the consent agenda did include the Blue Line Solution contract, authorizing the mayor to sign the contract. He also stated that the public there was public participation in the council meeting. In reviewing it, it appears Mr. Jones did not actually make a records request for a copy of the contract being signed. He texted with members of the council regarding that item. appearing on the agenda. He sought information and asked questions of council members rather than actually requesting a record. The approval of the contract with Blue Line Solutions was properly noticed on the agenda. Action was taken by the council at the meeting. In fact, the contract was removed from the consent agenda and deliberated and approved on during the meeting. Iowa code does not require the city to allow people to address them on every action item. The city did provide a citizen comments option to speak, which took place prior to the vote on the consent agenda. Mr. Jones did not provide any comments during this input, according to the minutes. Based on this, the complaint does not meet the requirements of a violation. He contacted council members regarding an agenda rather than make a records request. The contract was properly noticed. He could have spoken to the council regarding the matter during public comment period, but did not. For this reason, recommending dismissal.
Is Mr. Jones available to speak?
Yes, Blake Jones, I'm here.
Okay, if you'd like to speak, you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate your time and consideration and allowing me to speak on this matter. First and foremost, I'd like to just make a quick note that you know, when I make complaints and about items such like this, especially against my hometown city of Eldora, where I actually spent 5 years on city council, I actually helped head up this initial project of this Blue Line Solutions. So I was very familiar with this. I worked with the chief of police there to start this project. But I actually resigned city council before the final contract came along. So I wasn't able to, you know, see the final contract. But what led up to me wanting to see the final contract was the new House File HR 2681 and what that would allow for the new automated traffic systems in the state of Iowa, specifically for communities our size, which was less than the 20,000 population. We are initially looking at, you know, the mobile traffic cameras versus the fixed automated, you know, and what would be best fit for our community. I was unaware of what the initial or what the end result was going to be. I was not going to be in town that night for the meeting, so I wasn't going to be able to be there. I did text the council members for information, and to my knowledge, according to Chapter 22, Examination of public records are all records in any form of or belonging to a government body or official. Every person has the right to examine, copy, or disseminate a public record unless it falls under the limited exception spelled out in Chapter 22.7 or another law. Records custodians are required to respond to requests made in person, in writing, by telephone, or electronically. So my request, to my knowledge, was made, hey, I'm looking for information. I did it electronically and over the telephone. What is in this contract? And the reason I did so was because I was able to get some information that the end result, according to the minutes logged in the May 14 city council minutes, Chief Nick Hasselbrock provided details, and I'm reading this verbatim in the minutes. Chief Nick Hasselbrock provided details to the city council with a legislative update that the mobile devices and trailers were eliminated, but that we can still install the permanent traffic camera. The tentative location will be between 10th and 11th Street on Edgington. The permitting requirements were pushed back to 2026, so the city is not required to file a permit. Motion by Kramer, seconded by Carter, to approve and authorize the mayor to sign contract. Motion carried unanimously. My fear was that was exactly what would happen. And the reason I say that is because if you read House File 2681, Section 10.2, a local authority using an automated or remote system for traffic law enforcement at a location for the first time on or after January 1st, 2024, shall not be issued a permit by the Department of Transportation pursuant to Section 321P.2 as enacted by this act before January 1st, 2026. Now, the chief of police knew that, and he knew that going into the meeting, but according to the minutes here, he told the city council that he was okay to go through with this contract. Furthermore, I was the treasurer for the Police Trust Foundation, and the intent was the funds generated by the traffic camera and any citation coming in, we would be able to take a certain amount of funds out of that and put it into our police trust fund, in which they would be able to use in other places. So I was trying to prevent that from happening. That's why I made that complaint. That's why I was trying to attempt all of this. And and after everything transpired, I think some people kind of started to see the light, but now it's kind of a too little too late. So that's all I really have to say about that. I'd be happy to answer any more questions. Again, I appreciate your time and consideration on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Do we have anybody from the city of Eldora who would like to speak?
I'm not seeing anyone pop up.
Board discussion? What's a consent agenda?
That's where it's like, these are the 10 things, like paying bills or.
Oh, okay, all right.
Just approvals type
Okay.
things where they don't talk about each individual
Yeah,
item. They just
Thanks,
vote.
Scott. Yep, okay. I haven't heard it called that either, so. Any board comments?
So the bottom line is, we don't think that there was actually a request made for a public record, right?
Right, asking for information, asking questions is not a public records request.
Yeah. Okay.
Noted. Is there any other discussion by the board? If not, I will ask for a motion in a second.
So moved. To approve the order. I'm sorry, approve the
Dismissal order.
order, yes.
Second.
Second. Joel, any other board discussion?
I abstain.
AJ abstains. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you.
Next one.
Next case is Lindsay Gallardo, sorry if I said that wrong, versus Cedar Rapids Police Department, case number 24FC0049. In this case, Ms. Gallardo alleged Cedar Rapids Police Department violated Iowa Code Chapter 22. She alleges this violation was for refusing to provide body camera footage and additional information related to an incident. She alleges that she filed a request along with 30 plus other people for the release of body cam footage involving an incident on April 6th. DCI, she alleges, concluded their investigation into the incident on May 14th, but their FOIA request was denied on May 31st, citing this case is still being investigated. The city responded to the complaint and maintained its position. The records requested are exempt from disclosure due to the ongoing investigation. The request for public records was sent to the city on May 29. On May 31, the city responded indicating the case remained under investigation, was exempt from disclosure. The city stated in responding to this complaint, the case continues to move through a series of reviews pursuant to an ongoing investigation. Iowa Code Section 22.75 is the police officer's investigative reports that can be deemed confidential by a government body. The city indicated it had released, when requested, the date, time, specific location, immediate facts and circumstances surrounding the incident. But the remaining details regarding the case have been classified as confidential by the city. A balancing test was applied by the city, and case law makes clear that an ongoing nature of an investigation does weigh in favor of confidentiality. Non-disclosure allows law enforcement to test out findings and theories about cases under investigation. It also works to ensure overall investigation is not jeopardized before its conclusion. In this complaint, the city did provide the basic facts and circumstances surrounding the case as required under 22.75, but withheld additional aspects of the public record, including body cam footage and 911 calls due to the ongoing investigation relating to this case. For this reason, there is no violation of Chapter 22.
Is Ms. Gallardo on the phone? I apologize if I pronounced that wrong. She isn't there.
I'm not seeing anyone.
Okay, is there anybody from the Cedar Rapids Police Department? Board discussion, any comments?
This is still an ongoing investigation.
It's, there are a number of, it's going from different agencies are still reviewing it.
But it's
So
still
my
ongoing. There's CDCI's involved. Cedar Rapids
Yes,
is ongoing.
it is. Last I knew, it was ongoing. There has been information in the media about the case much more recently, but I believe there are still aspects of it that are ongoing in investigation. Definitely at the time this was produced, that was true.
Do I have a motion and a second on the dismissal order?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Joel, seconded by Joan. Any other comments from the board? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Dismissal order passes. Okay, next case.
This is Beckett concerning Iowa Department of Corrections, case number 24C0050. In this case, Beckett filed this formal complaint alleging the department violated Iowa Code Chapter 22 by refusing to provide the names, salaries, and titles of employees shown in a photograph. The photograph provided by Beckett is not a public record, but rather appears to be a photo taken by a member of the public. In his request on May 23rd, 2025, he saw the names, salaries, and titles of certain employees. And then on May 28th, 2024, he made a second request. On May 28th, his request was closed, citing a need for the names of the public officials, which is not a requirement of the law, according to him. On May 30th, he submitted another request to obtain the names of the individuals who closed his initial request and the names of the individuals at Department of Corrections. That too was wrongly closed with an invalid reason. Department responded to the complaint and maintained the position regarding employees identified with the photograph within the photograph could not be provided. The department did provide the information regarding the employee that closed the initial request. In response to Beckett's first request, the department did acknowledge names, salaries, and titles of employees are considered public records under Chapter 22. However, the department could not provide this information without the actual names or identification of the employees. Beckett provided a photograph and asked for information regarding those people. Beckett is not requesting an existing public record, but rather he's requesting the department identify two individuals based on a photograph that does not belong to the government body. In other words, he's requesting answer to a question: who are these employees? This is not a record that's stored, preserved, belongs to the department. And the department would be required to either provide answers to Beckett's questioning or create a public record that does not currently exist to respond to this records request. Chapter 22 does not require the department to do either. And in regards to Beckett's second request regarding the names, salaries, and titles of employees who responded to the original public records request, that information has been provided to Beckett following the filing of his complaint, so that issue has been resolved. So we find that this complaint does not appear legally sufficient. Requesting identification of employees from a photograph is not a records request. There's no violation of Chapter 22 and failing to provide an answer to the question presented to the department.
Is Beckett online? You see, okay. Is there anybody from the Iowa Department of Corrections
Excuse me, Mike Spall, Council for the Department. I just want to thank the board and the staff for your work on this case and sound legal reasoning that we'll get in. Thank you.
More discussion?
This is just a photograph out there, somebody took it on their phone or something, and then they asked for identification based on that. It wasn't published in the Mitchellville Herald or anything like that.
I don't know where the
It's just a-
photograph
It's
came
just a
from.
photo. Well, it's not public record.
My comments are
We would have identified it. Everyone would have been able to.
Any other comments from the board? If not, I'll ask for a motion in a second.
I move to dismiss.
Second.
We already got it.
EJB, you married.
EJB, you did it this time. Any other comments from the board? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Dismissal. Our next case.
All right, I have them, it's like, oh, sorry, I have the wrong, I'm out of order in my deck. Yep, Blake Jones.
Yeah.
Oh, I already turned it over, sorry. Blake Jones, City of Eldora, case number 24FC0053. In this case, Mr. Jones filed this complaint alleging the city violated Iowa Code Chapter 22. Mr. Jones alleges he made a public records request from City of Eldora on June 13, 2024. He alleges he went to City Hall and requested public records related to an incident involving his employment. He spoke with city staff and was informed he would have to speak with city's designated attorney for any records request. On the same day, he outreached to the city's attorney. The attorney responded on June 18 and just stated he was not an employee of the city or lawful custodian of the records. The city's attorney directed Mr. Jones to file a records request at the City Hall. It's unrefuted. Mr. Jones attempted to obtain public records at City Hall and was directed to the city's attorney, who then directed Mr. Jones back to the city. There appears to be some confusion regarding who the lawful custodian of public records is, or who has the responsibility for implementing the requirements of Chapter 22. The city may have a valid reason for responding to a request and directing the request in June to their attorney. However, the city has not provided a clear explanation about why neither the city nor the attorney have properly responded to Mr. Jones' June 13 records request. Based on this, it's a recommendation of his acceptance to address the issue.
Mr. Jones, would you like to respond? We'll give you 5 minutes.
Yes. Again, I appreciate your time and consideration. This one dates back a few months. I think I'd made a separate complaint on this kind of a similar, same incident. And if you take note, I think you'll see that a precedent has been set by the city of Eldora on this, and that's my opinion. Again, I'll let you folks make your own. I'd just like to take note. I'm looking here at some emails. Maybe I don't know if you have the same paperwork that I do. I originally made a request dating back on March 9th for an information request regarding my employment. I received an email back from HR gal, Michelle Kelly. She said she'd attach the files for requests. She'll follow up the recordings and files. I received one sheet of paper, one piece of paper out of the, I bet there would be 50 to 60 documents that would be attached. And all of these documents, I'd like to note, are very, they were very pertinent to an ongoing case or an investigation that had nothing to do with City of Eldora, but they had to do with my employment and the City of Eldora. And I'll get to that in a moment. So I didn't receive but one sheet of paper that I needed. On March 27th, I emailed the City of Eldora again, attaching it to Michelle Kelly and Administrator Budwig, Aaron Budwig. And there I noted Iowa Code Chapter 80F.1, Peace Officer, Public Safety, Emergency Personnel Bill of Rights. Specifically, Section 20, the employing agency shall keep an officer's statement, recording, or transcripts of any interviews or disciplinary proceedings and any complaint, excuse me, made against an officer's confidential, an officer confidential unless otherwise provided by law or with the officer's written consent. Nothing in this section prohibits the release of an officer's statement, recording, or transcripts of any interviews or disciplinary proceedings and any complaints made against an officer to the officer or to the officer's legal counsel upon the officer's request. Now, I made those requests. I was acting on my own behalf, which is perfectly fine to do. I made those requests for all documents. They knew very well, Administrator Budwig, HR Michelle Kelly, Captain Wayne Stelly, Chief Nick Hatzbrock of the Eldora Police Department knew very well, and so did their third party counsel that they brought in, knew very well that many of these documents, recordings, and video recordings and audio recordings that they had could have been seen as exculpatory evidence to be used in favor of me in possible disciplinary action that could have been taken against me. And I didn't receive those in time. In fact, I didn't receive any of them that I had to go by way. In fact, many of these items that they had were found that I end up going by other way of action that I did receive, found the city of Eldora and the police department were in violation of DCI policy of equipment that they were using were not to be in standards of Iowa codes. And they knew that. And I think that's why they were withholding that from me. And again, and if you take note to that, these messages that I'd received later on, that they were instructed by the mayor and by the administrator not to have any interaction with me regarding any city business. Again, as I stated previously, I think you'll see a precedent here. With all of my time as a reserve officer, as an EMT, as a full-time police officer, 5 years on city council, being mayor pro tem, being chairman of the public safety committee, I knew a lot of the ins and outs of the city, and then suddenly they want to completely cut me off of everything. I think that's a precedent by the city of Eldora. And for them to just completely want to hide documents and not give them up, something's amiss there. So again, I appreciate your time and your consideration and everything that you do, folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Again, is there anybody from the city of Eldora? Okay. Comments from the board? So are these employment records?
There was a records request that was made, and basically the issue is a records request was made. They said if you want a records request, you gotta contact the attorney. He contacted the attorney. The attorney said contact the city, and nobody ever responded to these requests.
But the records, are they his personnel file?
I don't remember what the request itself was, but even if they're confidential, if there's a records request, you need to respond.
Right. Yes, I agree.
So the city has never responded to
this request. Well, they're responding to talk to the attorney, and the attorney said talk to the city.
and that was the end of it.
Yep.
We did get a response from the attorney. Once we sent out the request for information, we did get a response from the attorney. And the attorney indicated that, first of all, they said they've already responded to the records request in April, and that he would need to go back to the city or ILEA to get the records, but there was still no formal response other than sort of that continuous circling, go back to the city or to someone else to get it. There's no formal response in any way from the city, other than the lawyer continuing to say he's not the lawful custodian.
If I may, I can kind of help comment on that.
No, this is just for the board discussion. This is just for the board
Oh, I'm
discussion.
sorry. My apologies. Thank you.
He is how to respond.
Yeah, I mean,
He hasn't, I mean, even if, they think the April issue was resolved, this is a different issue. He's entitled to a response from somebody, even if they tell him that you're not entitled to this, right? But he's entitled to it, so therefore I would approve the acceptance.
All right, I have a motion to approve the acceptance order. By Joel, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Joel, seconded by Joe. Any other board discussion?
I abstain from this one.
All right. AJ abstains. All right, and no further discussion. All in favor of the acceptance order?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No opposed. AJ abstains. All right. Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you.
Uh,
all right, next matters, Samuel Kleiss, and I apologize if I said that wrong. Hudson City Council, case number 24FC0054. In this case, Mr. Kleiss alleges that this Hudson City Council violated Iowa Code Chapter 21 by holding a closed session. The closed session was regarding an ongoing vicious dog issue. In going into the closed session, they cited 21.51C, which is alleging that there's current or imminent litigation regarding the matter. He alleges that he attended the meeting and asked that they keep it open, citing the intent of Chapter 21 and reminding them that when there's ambiguity in the application, it should be resolved in favor of openness. He does not believe it should have been a closed session because there was no current or imminent litigation, and they never threatened litigation. The attorney for the city responded to the complaint and maintained the closed session was justified. Specifically, the city is currently researching a request by Mr. Kleiss to take further action regarding dogs within the community. The action would require the city to litigate a case under a different section of city code. The attorney stated he needed to meet with the council to discuss the litigation research and provide a legal analysis of whether litigation would be successful under the different section of city code. He shared that having this discussion in open session would have allowed potential litigants to have an advantage regarding the litigation, and potential litigants would have access to potential risks, evidentiary matters, and strategy. Holding a closed session between council and attorney for this purpose is an appropriate use of Iowa Code 21.51C. In reviewing this, the city did appropriately use a closed session to discuss strategy with council regarding litigation, utilizing a different section of city code to address vicious dogs in the community. The city followed appropriate processes and procedures. There's no violation of Iowa Code 21.5.
Mr. Kleiss on the phone.
Nobody is jumping out.
Do we have anybody for the city of Hudson?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. And,
Hi, this is Heather Prendergast. I'm the city attorney for the city of Hudson. And I am present on the call, and I was the one that drafted the response to this board regarding Mr. Kleitz's allegation of an improper use of a closed session. You properly summarized my response. About the only thing I would add is that I am a she, not a he. So your dismissal order, if you choose to approve it, could probably be modified to indicate that she provided the response as opposed to he.
Our apologies.
Not a worry. Just wanted to be correct. That's all.
thank you very much. Any comments or from the board? Not, I'll ask for a motion in a second with the correction for she.
I'll move the dismissal
With the correction.
with the correction.
Okay. Joel moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Joan second. Any other further discussion from the board? Not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you, Ms. Pendergrass.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Last piece.
All right, and again, I apologize if I mispronounce this. Chandler Trotwine concerning Marshalltown Police Department, case number 24 FC 055. Mr. Trotwine filed this formal complaint alleging the city violated Iowa Code Chapter 22. He alleges the city refused to provide dash and body cam footage related to an incident involving himself. He alleges he requested this dash and body cam footage for an incident that occurred on June 6th. His original public records request was submitted to the city on June 12th. He requested access to several records, including documents related to a citation, dash cam recordings, video recordings, speedometer calibration, radar logs, and training policies. The city responded through a series of releases of information, corresponding communications with Mr. Trotwine. And the evidence submitted shows the city provided available records to him, but denied access to dash and body cam recording, citing confidentiality under 22.75. The city responded to the complaint and provided a record of communications they had with Mr. Trotwine. The city's position is the dash and body cam footage are exempt from public record disclosure pursuant to Iowa Code 22.75, which is police investigative files. The records, even though the records are exempt from disclosure of public records, they did offer to provide a viewing of the footage to Mr. Trotwine and to provide the footage pursuant to the district court discovery process. The response, the city maintains that the recordings are confidential as peace officer investigative reports under 22.75. The investigation remains ongoing and required elements of the incident have been released in compliance with Iowa Code 22. The city did provide an analysis that applies the existing balancing standard test used to determine whether a police officer investigative report should remain confidential. Citing Hawkeye, the city argues public interest would suffer from disclosure of the public record at this stage. There's no claims of use of officer force or officer misconduct, which would tilt the scales of favor in public discourse. In reviewing, we agree the balancing analysis completed by the city and also agree that existing case laws demonstrated an ongoing nature of investigation weighs in favor of confidentiality. The city has responded to his public records request and has also attempted to work with Mr. Trotwine to provide the confidential information to him through the trial court proceedings rather than providing the records as recordings as a public record. For this reason, there's no violation found of Chapter 22.
Is Mr. Troutwine on the line? Do we have anybody from the city of Marshalltown?
Doug Herman is here for Holly Corkery, who submitted the city's argument, if you have any questions.
Any comments from the board?
Nope.
Do I have a motion and a second?
Motion to approve the order.
Second.
Barry and EJ, any other further comment from the board? All in favor of the dismissal order?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Dismissal approved. All right. Thank you very much for being on the line for
You bet.
with us.
Yep. Thank you much.
Right. Committee reports. I guess the pending actions, there's quite a few over there.
So committee reports, training committee, hoping to have that meeting in the next couple of months, but getting through some of these other things first. The legislative committee, we will be meeting immediately after this meeting to discuss 3 potential areas of proposed legislation. 2 of them are previous areas that we have proposed legislation increasing the time frame for filing complaints from 60 to 90 days, adding a requirement upon receipt of a records request to be promptly acknowledged, and other areas. And then also looking at whether or not we want to propose legislation addressing posting of notices, accessibility, amended agendas, and cancellation.
That one I would really like to push because I'm on another board and we've got lots and lots of comments about where notices are published, especially when we only have a weekly paper in some areas of the state, and most people don't take those newspapers. So we will be working on that. Those things will be then coming to the board for full approval when the legislative committee is done. Just wanted to keep you guys aware of that. Rules committee.
Yeah, so the Fearless Rules Committee with Joan at the helm met today. We're continuing to work our way through the complaint process, which is chapter 2 of the current administrative rules. We have a discussion guide and we're probably going to meet for 2 hours for the next meeting to really sit down and take a closer look at the overall process, how that works, and other things like form, burden of proof. So we definitely have our work ahead of us. So we're continuing to take a look at that discussion guide and work through some of the big issues in the complaint process. So progress is being made.
Office status.
Office update. So a couple things. We will be interviewing potential new attorney twos this week and next week. Hope to have somebody joining us by the next board meeting at the very latest. So look for that. We're excited about all of our candidates. So I think we're going to have great staff coming on. The other thing is, I think I mentioned it last month, and the update we've gotten on the move is we're looking at October to move to Jesse Parker. Again, that's kind of subject to change. There's a lot of moving parts, but that is, we're kind of planning on that, and we're excited about that move. We did go over and tour. We would be in the same area with Ethics and Campaign Disclosure Board, for those of you that know Zach Goodrich. And we will have some conference rooms available to us there that will be easily accessible. And so we're looking forward to that. Financial budget update. The new fiscal year started July 1. I don't think there's much. So far, we're still in the black for our spending. So we'll continue to watch that. Presentations and trainings. We have a couple of trainings coming up. Some are just requests for training, and some of them are in regards to informal resolutions. If we get a request for training, we try our best to say yes. So we are continuing to work on that.
What is?
And it's early education. I can't remember exactly what it is.
Early education.
I can look it up if you
No,
want.
that's okay. I was just kind of curious.
So they're looking for just kind of a broad update on open meetings and public records, but really focusing on the changes to the 21.8 and any other changes that have come through. District court update, the Van Pelt appeal of our decision, which was something we decided, I think, in October, November of last year, related to records for cameras, contracts with the city for camera replacement. The review of that went to district court this morning. I believe they had a hearing. I have not heard yet how that went. The swarm case that was argued in January. We're still waiting for a decision from the court on that. The Ward case is, it was dismissed at the district court level, but it appears he's appealing in some fashion, so I'm not exactly sure where that is right now. The status of that procedurally. So that's where we are on those. Our next IPIB board meeting is September 19th. I think we did talk a little bit about, since there's only 7 of us and we need 5, we know of at least one person who won't be here in September. Potentially, EJ might not have access. So I just wanted to see if there were others who knew they would not be available, so we can start working on rescheduling that meeting if necessary.
Well, I'm gonna try to get there in person
That'd be great if you could, Barry.
because I want somebody to explain to me what a yellow triangle is.
Yeah, wait, yeah, I'd like to know myself.
Isn't that a yield sign?
Thinking the same thing. I have no idea.
Okay. I thought maybe
Do I
I.
have Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I would know.
Do I have a motion? Do I have a second for adjourn?
I just have one thing.
Oh, wait, hold on. EJ has a question.
What?
Is Eric gonna continue with us then after school starts?
Oh, so Eric, you wanna talk about your plans and how you're gonna take over the world?
One step at a time. No, it's, so it's gonna be, next week will be my last week here. And then after that, law school starts up again. I'm going to be working with the legal clinic over at Drake, the Children's Rights Clinic over there. So that should keep me pretty busy, but it's really been a blast to work here. So
Yeah, he's done a really great job, and we're really pleased that he chose to spend some time with us this summer, so.
And I noted on the work that you did that I was really pleased to hear you're a legal intern rather than opposed to illegal intern.
Erica, do you have another intern coming?
We don't have another intern coming. We're gonna try to get our new attorney onboarded. And then we'll probably we might reach out to Drake depending on if we have funding and space for another intern. I think it's been really great having, the energy and the thoughtfulness and somebody who really likes to dig into the research. So hopefully we'll get as lucky next time we have an intern.
I always hesitate making suggestions because they'll end up in a committee that I want. But maybe we can get a different title for the intern.
What do you have in mind?
I don't yet, but I'm working on it.
What title would you like, Eric?
I don't know. I wasn't sure. I always figured a law clerk was more like working for judges and that kind of stuff. Intern.
Well, we think your boss is equivalent to a judge at status. I mean, so I didn't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
Really? You guys better start rising when I come in.
Then you can talk about yourself. You want to?
I have a motion tonight. Yes, I do have a second. All right, all in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
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 Take care, Barry. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Barry?
Yeah.
Let me stop this. Hold on just a second.
That's right.
Do we stay on the same call for the Google site for this? Yeah.
Okay, I just stopped streaming so that we can separate out and give everybody a chance to get out, and then we'll jump back on.